The 13th tribe, the Khazar Empire and its heritage. It took the Caliph's mission nearly a year, from June 21st, 921 to May 12th, 922, to reach its destination, the land of the Volga Bulgars. The direct route from Baghdad to the Volga leads across the Caucasus and Khazaria. To avoid the latter, they had to make the enormous detour around the eastern shore of the Khazar Sea, the Caspian. Even so, they were constantly reminded of the proximity of the Khazars and its potential dangers. A characteristic episode took place during their sojourn with the Guz army chief, the one with the disreputable underwear. They were at first well received and given a banquet, but later the Guz leaders had second thoughts because of their relations with the Khazars. The chief assembled the leaders to decide what to do. The most distinguished and influential among them was the Turkan. He was lame and blind and had a maimed hand. The chief said to them, "These are the messengers of the king of the Arabs, and I do not feel authorized to let them proceed without consulting you." Then the Turkan spoke. "This is a matter the like of which we have never seen or heard before. Never has an ambassador of the Sultan traveled through our country since we and our ancestors have been here. Without doubt, the Sultan is deceiving us. These people he is really sending to the Khazars to stir them up against us. The best will be to cut each of these messengers into two and to confiscate all their belongings." Another one said, "No, we should take their belongings and let them run back naked whence they came." Another said, "No, the Khazar king holds hostages from us. Let us send these people to ransom them." They argued among themselves for 7 days, while Ibn Fadlan and his people feared the worst. In the end, the Guz let them go. We are not told why. Probably Ibn Fadlan succeeded in persuading them that his mission was in fact directed against the Khazars. The Guns had earlier on fought with the Khazars under another Turkish tribe, the Pechenegs, but more recently had shown a hostile attitude, hence the hostages the Khazars took. The Khazar menace loomed large on the horizon all along the journey. North of the Caspian, they made another huge detour before reaching the Bulgar encampment somewhere near the confluence of the Volga and the Kama. There, the king and leaders of the Bulgars were waiting for them in a state of acute anxiety. As soon as the ceremonies and festivities were over, the king sent for Ibn Fadlan to discuss business. He reminded Ibn Fadlan in forceful language. His voice sounded as if he were speaking from the bottom of a barrel, of the main purpose of the mission, to wit, the money to be paid to him, so that I shall be able to build a fortress to protect me from the Jews who subjugated me. Unfortunately, that money, a sum of 4,000 dinars, had not been handed over to the mission, owing to some complicated matter of red tape. It was to be sent later on. On learning this, the king, a personality of impressive appearance, broad and corpulent, seemed close to despair. He suspected the mission of having defrauded the money. What would you think of a group of men who are given a sum of money destined for a people that is weak, besieged and oppressed, yet these men defraud the money? I replied, "This is forbidden. Those men would be evil." He asked, "Is this a matter of opinion or a matter of general consent?" I replied, "A matter of general consent." Gradually, Ibn Fadlan succeeded in convincing the king that the money was only delayed, but not to allay his anxieties. The king kept repeating that the whole point of the invitation was the building of the fortress, because he was afraid of the king of the Khazars. And apparently he had every reason to be afraid, as Ibn Fadlan relates. The Bulgar's king's son was held as a hostage by the king of the Khazars. It was reported to the king of the Khazars that the Bulgar king had a beautiful daughter. He sent a message to sue for her. The Bulgar king used pretexts to refuse his consent. The Khazar sent another messenger and took her by force, although he was a Jew and she a Muslim. But she died at his court. The Khazar sent another messenger and asked for the Bulgar's king's other daughter. But in the very hour when the messenger reached him, the Bulgar king hurriedly married her to the prince of the Askil, who was his subject, for fear that the Khazar would take her too by force, as he had done with her sister. This alone was the reason which made the Bulgar king enter into correspondence with the Caliph and ask him to have a fortress built because he feared the king of the Khazars. It sounds like a refrain. Ibn Fadlan also specifies the annual tribute the Bulgar king had to pay the Khazars. 1 sable fur from each household in his realm. Since the number of Bulgar households, tents, is estimated to have been around 50,000, and since Bulgar sable fur was highly valued all over the world, the tribute was a handsome one. What Ibn Fadlan had to tell us about the Khazars is based, as already mentioned, on intelligence collected in the course of his journey, but mainly at the Bulgar court. Unlike the rest of his narrative, derived from vivid personal observations, the pages on the Khazars contained second-hand, potted information, and fall rather flat. Moreover, the sources of his information are biased, in view of the Bulgar king's understandable dislike of his Khazar overlord, while the Caliphate's resentment of a kingdom embracing a rival religion need hardly be stressed. The narrative switches abruptly from a description of the Rus court to the Khazar court. Concerning the king of the Khazars, whose title is Kagan, he appears in public only once every 4 months. They call him the Great Kagan. His deputy is called Kagan Beck. He is the one who commands and supplies the armies, manages the affairs of state, appears in public, and leads in war. The neighboring kings obey his orders. He enters every day into the presence of the Great Kagan with deference and modesty, barefooted, carrying a stick of wood in his hand. He makes obeisance, lights the stick, and when it is burned down, he sits down on the throne on the king's right. Next to him in rank is a man called the Kaender Kagan, and next to that one, the Jawshiger Kagan. It is the custom of the Great Kagan not to have social intercourse with people, and not to talk with them, and to admit nobody to his presence except those we have mentioned. The power to bind or release, to mete out punishment, and to govern the country belongs to his deputy, the Kagan Beck. It is a further custom of the Great Kagan that when he dies, a great building is built for him, containing 20 chambers, and in each chamber a grave is dug for him. Stones are broken until they become like powder, which is spread over the floor and covered with pitch. Beneath the building flows a river, and this river is large and rapid. They divert the river water over the grave, and they say that this is done so that no devil, no man, no worm, and no creeping creatures can get at him. After he has been buried, those who buried him are decapitated, so that nobody may know in which of the chambers is his grave. The grave is called Paradise, and they have a saying, "He has entered paradise." All the chambers are spread with silk, brocade interwoven with threads of gold. It is the custom of the king of the Khazars to have 25 wives. Each of the wives is the daughter of a king who owes him allegiance. He takes them by consent or by force. He has 60 girls for concubines, each of them of exquisite beauty. Ibn Fadlan then proceeds to give a rather fanciful description of the Kagan's harem, where each of the 85 wives and concubines has a palace of her own, and an attendant or eunuch who, at the king's command, brings her to his alcove, faster than the blinking of an eye. After a few more dubious remarks about the customs of the Khazar Kagan, we shall return to them later, Ibn Fadlan at last provides some factual information about the country. The king has a great city on the river Itil, Volga, on both banks. On one bank live the Muslims. On the other bank, the king and his court. The Muslims are governed by one of the king's officials, who is himself a Muslim. The lawsuits of the Muslims living in the Khazar capital and of visiting merchants from abroad are looked after by that official. Nobody else meddles in their affairs or sits in judgment over them. Ibn Fadlan's travel report, as far as it is preserved, ends with the words, "The Khazars and their king are all Jews. The Bulgars and all of their neighbors are subject to him. They treat him with worshipful obedience. Some are of the opinion that Gog and Magog are the Khazars.